If you're scrounging to find a panel, don't do a panel, right? Like
Right.
if you're going to bring a panel, bring it. Like bring the conversation, get 4 people, 3, 5 on stage to have this dynamic discussion about a topic that people want to know. Welcome to Event Marketing Redefined, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's the first leg of our summer tour. We appreciate you being here. As always, we're going to give you the best hour that we can possibly give you on a topic that we think is important. And we usually have really cool people on, which is why Bibi is here. Bibi, thank you for coming here. And thank you for kind of sparking this conversation with me about the old playbook versus the new playbook and wanting to have it. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's do it. We have a nice crowd here today. So, Bibi, very quickly, I want you to kind of tell people who you are and sort of, I think your journey and the different roles and things that you've done puts you in a very unique position to talk about this topic. So would love to give a little bit of introduction, please.
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I am Bibi Brown. I have touched now all sides of events as I'm currently just started a new role here at GES, which if you're in the event space, you're pretty familiar with who we are. But prior to that, I have been an event organizer. I've been on the agency side, so event organizer for profit. So I've worked at UBM and Penn10 and Informa on large brands like Black Hat and GDC, which you either love them or hate them, but they're, 40,000 plus people and attendees, huge expo floors, taking over San Francisco, Moscone, North, South, and West, like just massive, 200 sessions, et cetera. To the agency side, which I was at 10Q and Opus. And so we're creative production agency, building out keynote stages, figuring out activations, third-party strategy, how a brand would show up at CES or Art Basel or something to that effect. And now I've come full circle and I'm at GES. So we're behind the scenes. So we're the folks that help you out with carpet, furniture, your booth space, your registration, the counters, providing all the things that make your event tick. So it's been an interesting journey. And I got to say, I just absolutely love this industry. I love what we do.
Awesome. That was perfect, Bibi. So what I want to do, I want to preface just why I think this conversation is important, talking about old playbook and new playbook, because we are going to touch on various things. We're going to touch on the trade show side, both from exhibitor standpoint and just the association and contractor, just everything running the show. We're also going to talk about like host events and people's own events that they're running, whether small or large. And just, I think a lot of these topics of old versus new really play across that. Okay. What I think is particularly important in one little piece that I've been putting together and connecting the dots here is things in the corporate event world are shifting. That is for sure in my mind. I think that the corporate event marketers being asked to do more than they've ever done. And I don't mean just asking to do more tasks, although they are consistently asked to do more tasks, but I think more from a strategic standpoint, more from being aligned with sales and marketing, more that events are a real part of go-to-market. They are a real part of sales and marketing, and the importance of strategy, driving results, and being intentional with your events, I think is something that's not going to go away. And I think the last piece of that is that with technology maturing at an incredible rate and AI, which will exponentially grow on top of already just tech tools and, the internet maturity, I think face-to-face will consistently stay more important than ever. And there's something to being together. So I think that's what makes this conversation so important here, talking about maybe some old and what the new looks like. So Bibi, give me just give me a couple of your big ones. Let's dive right into like old and new. Let's go negative. Let's go negative first. Give me a little bit of the things that you'd like to see disappear here that you think are old playbook. I have a few. So go ahead.
So many, but I'll try to, in the essence of time, keep it down. And I hope I'm not offending anybody that's on here that might find themselves victims.
Give me a few at a time and we'll run through them.
Perfect. Death by keynote, first and foremost.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Those days are over.
Yep.
The 2-hour luncheon awards that happen, the plastic chicken dinners that happen at the end of those awards. My God, those have to go. The basic step and repeat where you think you just pull up that banner and people are just going to step up there and take a photo and all it has is the brand on the background. I think having some of those big name entertainment type of things, that's getting not so great. Now that we've got so many generations that are going on, the basic happy hour with the pretzel and the beer or wine on the expo floor, that's kind of a no-go. Swag bags, oh my God, please talk about the swag bag situation.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
hit this list a little bit here. So, death by keynote to me, what I am seeing more is people want to talk with each other versus one person at a bunch of people, right? And I think you saw a lot of events get real heavy with just like steady keynotes, a lot of keynotes. And I think, if I'm being honest, part of it is what I talk about, like kind of the maturity of the internet. Like a lot of these people that would give a keynote, you can watch them on YouTube. You can access their information. But what you can't access regularly is discussions with your peers, discussions with your suppliers, your vendors, problem solving. So I think that's a big one of a lot of the ones you listed. To me, is it's more of a mind type shift mentality for everybody listening. If you're a corporate event marketer, whether you're hosting your own event, whatever it may be, is how can you fold more peer-to-peer, think tank style, get people to open up, problem solve, talk with one another, and share problems? I think that's just a big piece of where things are going.
Absolutely, Matt. I mean, that's in a nutshell, right? The old playbook is fill the room, butts and seats.
Yeah.
New playbook is move the room, mobilize people, get them engaging. And, part of that is also events spend money on an app. Why not start to put that to your advantage then, or pull that into the discussion? So if you really can't break your C-suite or your organizer, the people that are signing the checks, and they're just like, no, we're old school. We really want this keynote. If you can't break them of that habit, or you've been doing it for years, sometimes it takes a while to shift, start to reinvent it then. Think, okay, well, we're not going to have this hour long. What if we make it 30 minutes instead? And we're going to take so many questions from the audience. Because to your point, Matt, like people can go see the speaker already on YouTube. Yeah. Make it a TED Talk style then. There's other ways to start to evolve your previous legacy way of doing.
Yeah. And I think, what that makes me think about? It's something I spoke with a few people the other day, actually at our own event, was essentially this idea of panels. And I don't necessarily believe that panels are in the old playbook and that they should stay there and not be in the new. I think panels are something that need to be adjusted. I think panels need more depth of conversation, more like specific, better questions. Someone needs to drive a better conversation. I think we've gotten uberly lazy with panels. We're giving seats to people that have no business being up there just because of who they are, or because they sponsor something, or because we're just scrounging to find. If you're scrounging to find a panel, don't do a panel, right? Like if you're going to bring a panel, bring it. Like bring the conversation, get 4 people, 3, 5 on stage to have this dynamic discussion about a topic that people want to know. So I think it just needs an adjustment.
We want the friction. That's what people are there. They don't want to see 4 people there politely agreeing with one another when we know deep down inside they don't. Make it interesting. Make it, to your point, make it dynamic. Maybe it could be a little polarizing. Maybe it's a surprise coupling. It could be 2 competitors, or it could be 2 unlikely pairings that you didn't think about. There's so much. And for goodness sakes, can we no longer have the manels, which is what I call an all-male panel? Like they've got to evolve, right? It's time.
One thing I was thinking about, I'm skipping around a little bit, but back to the keynote, Mandy's laughing at the mantle. The mantle thing is definitely going to the mantle will become something just because of its name there. But one thing I was thinking about with the keynotes was there are a lot of keynotes that I have seen that are what I consider to be inspirational, which what I mean by that is nothing wrong with an inspirational message. I love a good inspirational message, but how many inspirational messages can I get where I'm inspired for 10 minutes and then I leave and go about my day? I think if you are looking to do keynotes, I keep using the word depth. People want depth. Give them a conversation where they're taking not just 30,000 foot view. Get down and dirty. Like if you know what you're talking about and you have the knowledge and the information, relay that and find a way, whether it's keynote or whether it's in a panel, is we're in the room from a set industry to a specific topic, whatever it may be. I think just creating more depth. If you are running an event, hosting a panel, whatever, doing a keynote, I think the keynotes are going to have to shift here. I think too many people, no offense to them, but too many people have made careers with shitty keynotes that are traveling around and getting $10 to $50, $80,000 per session. And they're really just not that great.
They're not that great. And there's so much more. Yes, I agree with you on the depth part, but it's also got to be more than that. It's got to be relevant. How does this keynote tie into
Yes.
your theme, tie into what you're about? Yes, aspirationals and inspirationals can be great. And maybe that's what your afternoon is going to be
Yeah.
about so that people have had time to make the connections they want, start little conversations,
Yep.
engage with your brand the way they need to, or the event the way they need to. But also, to your point, and I mentioned this earlier as like one of my old things out with the old playbook of having just those big name entertainments, having this keynote speakers that are working the circuit and you're spending $80,000 to have that person.
Yeah.
Go
Oh,
to
yeah.
influencers, right? Influencers are a great way. Pull someone in. If you're dealing with a tight budget, you also need to connect with a different generation that's present. This is a great way to start to make those connections and make sure they know your brand. I can't tell you how many times, I'm sure you have too, we all have been to an event, gone to a keynote, and that person clearly has no idea who's in the audience, what this brand's about, what the event's even about, and they're just blabbing their face off, and you're like, I have no takeaway except
Or
for a fall asleep leg. Like, this is great.
with what you're saying, Bibi, I've also seen where keynotes try too hard to attach it to the industry, and it doesn't make any sense. It's not relative, which just tells me that the keynote is shit. It doesn't, not them. That keynote doesn't belong there, that you're reaching for something. And you could probably cut your keynotes by 3 or 10.
Yeah.
Some events have 40 keynotes. You're like, this is crazy. Such a big. Let's move to a few others. I have one that is like a huge pet peeve of mine. I think it's the most disgusting form of events, and that is pitches disguised as sessions. I loathe it. I hate it. It reeks. It's the most disingenuous thing in the business. I think it's an insult to people's intelligence. I hate them. So I would say if you're running an event, eliminate it at all cost. If you're bringing people to an event, drive them value. What do they want to learn about? What matters to them? What's relevant, like you pointed out? What's important to them right now? What are industry topics that are vital? Not a company that's going to call a session something that gets your attention to then have you go sit there and sit through a pitch. It's bullshit. I hate it.
No, it's so true. It's something I think events need to be really careful about and think about when they're having kind of a sponsor session.
Yeah.
You don't want that sponsor then spending the first 2, 3 minutes pitching your audience on their product or whatever it is. It's got to have the value. People's attention spans are that of a gnat. Thanks to all of our devices and instant content, instant gratification, we just don't want to be held hostage in some session. And that's basically what you're doing. You're holding your attention hostage. So there's got to be other ways. And sponsors are starting to get that more and more. So have that tough conversation with them. I think some organizers are too afraid to have that hard conversation with their sponsor because they just need the dollars. They're relying on it, especially associations, right? They're relying on that money. But it's okay. You don't have to just take anything. You get to set the standards, set the bar, tell them.
Yeah. I think, again, to your point, and piggybacking on what I said, is I think what it turns me to is allowing sponsors to maybe have more discussion about what they would like to do. Because I think part of the new playbook and where the shift is like intentional and meaningful engagement.
Yes.
Not engaging just to engage, but allow me as a sponsor to come to you and say, hey, like, this is what I'd like to do. What do you think? Because your sponsor should be wanting to create value for the attendees so you don't have to worry about that. And I know that's tough, but I think in a very broad stroke, I think that's a direction that I see happening and seen more and more, and one that's important for a good shift.
Absolutely. I mean, think about, as an organizer, whatever the event is, you've got your call for speakers, right? There is a standard. You're not just letting anyone in. So why not hold your sponsors to that same bar? Review what session they want to have, who's going to be on their panel, does it work? And, have the conversation. I mean, the new playbook isn't about being louder, it's about being smarter.
Yeah, I agree with that. Else I think as we're talking about this one space here is I believe the best way to build the ecosystem for a successful event is to drive as much value to the attendee as humanly possible. Because if you have the attendees and you have the audience, the sponsors will want to be there no matter what. Yeah. And I'm not saying like stick it to the sponsors because we've all been sponsors. We've all done stuff. But when the attendees are there and they are engaged, and they are taking value away and there's demand to come back, the ecosystem feeds itself.
Yep.
It already creates it. People are there in the right headspace, in the right mood. So I think that is something that I'd like to see. We've gotten away from that a little bit. I think if you're running your own event, or if you're an association building an event, or you're a partner event,
Yeah.
value to the audience, value to the attendee.
Yeah. And that comes from listening to them all year, right? Staying plugged in with your audience, with your attendees. What have you been hearing? What themes have been coming up?
Yep.
What kind of case studies have they been, consuming? What kind of content have they been consuming? Because it's great. Go back to them, especially if you're association, go back to your sponsors, go back to your exhibitors, and then talk to them. Be like, hey, we've heard this all year. Here's an opportunity. Put a package together for them. Here's an opportunity that taps into sustainability. Here's a field trip that we can do. Here's a way to bring an activation to the floor that will set you apart. I mean, partners, be creative and innovative in the way that you're having the conversations with your sponsors and exhibitors. That's going to add value across the board, everyone.
Yeah. Bibi, let's take a question. I like to take questions and reward them so that they keep coming. But let's take one. We got one from anonymous attendee. Okay, anonymous, let's do this. Would love to hear what format people are leveraging as the new playbook. Are things actually being documented, and how, with so many different tools and ways of working now? Is a Google Doc out the door and a Google Deck a better format? Tasked with making a global playbook for my company, and feel like there are pros and cons to each format, but always coming back to the Google Doc. Thoughts? So Google Doc versus Google Deck, right? In there, and then tasked with making a global playbook for my company, and feel like there are pros and cons to each format.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, the Google Doc versus Google Deck, I think that's going to be internal. That's going to depend upon, right, how your organization operates and what works best for them. But essentially, what's going to get your ideas across? What's going to get the buy-in? Because you got to sell it up and got to sell it down. I think it's important to identify that and make sure everyone is collectively agreeing. But if you're talking about in terms of content that's being presented, yeah, have a template, I guess, a deck in which that's what all your speakers are using. I'm not sure if that's where the question was headed in terms of that. And in terms of being charged with coming up with the strategy, figuring out things that are working and not working, there are some playbooks, there are some things that are tried and true, but that's kind of what's nice about the new thing. I would say get your 3 things that work really well. Are people needing these breakout sessions? And how many do you need to have? Where are you seeing a lot of traffic on your expo floor? How are you going to evolve that? But then be ready to experiment. Say, you know what? We're going to put a theater now on the expo floor. Maybe that's what's sponsored. You're trying to come up with a package. And we're going to make this theater TED Talk style. We're going to have snackable content, and we're just going to run content every half hour. It's going to be 15 minutes. And maybe that's the thing that you experiment with that year. So I think it's identifying. So my recommendation to anonymous would be like identifying where is there an appetite to play, and only what your C-suite and people are going to want to play with. And then just make sure that you're really committed to that. Everyone decides, here's how we're going to measure it. Here's how we're going to deem it successful. And then you keep going. I
like that advice. I would say from my standpoint, Google Doc, Google Deck, not really my space. I'm borderline computer illiterate, but my thought on this is like, I don't know if there's just some new playbook that's going to be written for events, but I think to me, it's more of a mindset shift. It's challenging the way things have always been done. You go to somebody and say, hey, I want to do this. And there's there is a set way. There's a set way to do a breakout session and this and that. And I think you just have to start asking yourself more along the lines of, what results am I hoping to achieve from this event? And I think one of those questions goes underneath that is, how are you looking to move people? And by move people, I mean like emotionally plus strategically. So strategically would be like pipeline. Are you moving them through your customer journey? Emotionally is more like, how do you want someone to feel when they leave your event, when they leave being with your brand? What do you want them to think, right? And I think being more in touch with those things, and then strategically saying like, does having 20 keynotes really achieve what we want? Or are we just having a bunch of keynotes? So I think to me, it's more of a mindset thing as you go through your events. And I think a lot of what Bibi and I are laying out today are going to be probably ways that I would be thinking about it as you move forward.
That point, Matt, also having some, use the data that's available to you. Not so much that it's death by data, because we certainly all know what what that looks like. But just take a look at your event app. Over the past
Yep.
few years, where's there been a lot of traffic? Start with that. Can you lay
Hmm.
an AI plugin on top of it? AI is your friend. Make it work for you. And by
Yeah.
that, you can personalize, you can start to figure out what works for our calendar, what works for our agenda, what content has been working, and it can then kind of help you design.
I think I have here,
More
Bibi. I'd love you. What?
I said, ooh, more questions.
Do we have one in here? I saw a hand raised, but I don't have a question in the question box. If you have a question, there's a Q&A box down at the bottom. Throw it in there. Or if you throw it in the chat, we'll find it in the chat as well. So I want to throw this at you, Bibi, and I want to get a little bit of your take on it, right? I think one of the shifts that are happening when it comes to old playbook versus new playbook is I think the old playbook is a little bit of showing up and selling. And that would be in the case of an event or in the case of being an exhibitor at a trade show, either or. It's just we're going to show up and we're going to sell. And I think more where things are shifting is storytelling and marketing, right?
Yes.
I think it's becoming more storytelling and marketing. And that to me is the environments that you're building out, the engagements that you're creating. Are they meaningful? Are they purposeful? And kind of what I went back to is like, are you creating emotional and are you creating strategic movement with the audience and attendees? I'd love to get your thought on that.
Absolutely. Let's switch gears a little bit, I guess, and talk kind of like if you're an exhibitor, right?
Sure. Yeah.
How you're really showing up.
Yep.
And you're right, it's storytelling. That's what people want. They want the story
Yeah.
to tell. They want to feel connected. They also want to be immersed. And I think some brands forget that when you are an exhibitor, when you're on the expo floor, this is your introduction, right? This is your gateway. Someone's getting a taste of your brand, a taste of your values, a taste of who you are, of your vibe, of your product, of all those things. And so just having little tchotchkes that most people chalk. Now we're a world of sustainability, so that's not
Yeah.
very thoughtful in that way. But if you're just standing there and you're just going to show a demo, that's also not engaging. Have it interesting, things that spark conversation. So is there a way to make it an activity that really gets people developed? You know, like I've seen cities do this too when they show up on a trade floor. I've seen people decide like, oh, we're going to do like a lip lab, or you can make a candle, you know, somewhat custom scented. And now you kind of have someone captive at your booth 30 minutes, right? And you can just chat with them. It starts with a relationship. I think we've forgotten that all of this starts with building trust, building with relationships. So if you're just chatting with someone, shooting the breeze, suddenly you're just tearing down all kinds of walls, and then you get to find out what are their pain points. And then look at that. After 30 minutes, you've made your own scented candle. It was so great talking to you, so and so. You get to be more personable about it. You can come back tomorrow morning and you can pick it up. It'll be ready for you. Well, now guess what? This person's now coming back to your booth. They've had all day to percolate over whatever the conversation was. They've gone to some sessions that hopefully have sparked other things. So when they come back to you to pick up their custom candle, now you get to have additional conversations. It's become more than just kind of this scan the badge, lead gen BS.
I agree. And I think a lot of what I hear sometimes from people is like, it's split. Like people do want leads and they are trying to move the needle with pipeline. But then I always love people are just like, yeah, no, it's just a brand awareness play. And I'm like, okay, sure. Like that's great. But I think a lot of times people use that as a cop out to not do all the work that needs to be done in pre and during and post show to execute a trade show booth really properly. It's saying you're there for brand awareness to me is like an easy way out of saying we show up because we always have and we're going to be there. But to me, again, it goes back to when someone sees your booth, when someone comes in your booth, when somebody comes up and speaks to you, what are they thinking about your company? You are aisle to aisle, row to row with competitors and people. And if you have some lifeless corporate crappy booth that you have just rolled out there time and time again without any effort into it, what makes you think that you are going to get results? Is it just because people are just there? Right? Because they're there. And I think if it is a brand awareness play, I would ask somebody, what do you want people to think of your company? What do you want them to feel? Because I know whether I walk into a restaurant or a doctor's office or a hotel or anywhere that I go, I can tell the level of standard that business runs by very, very quickly. Yeah. And if your trade show booth is a tell sign of that.
It really is. And the truth is, it's also a bit of a pissing contest between.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Right? Not everyone can afford this massive booth that's got stairs and lights and this and that and all those things. So if you're one of those, then don't play that way. Go play a different way. Go do something else. I love some of the comments that are happening in the chat. Absolutely. Play into the wellness space then. Sponsor a wellness station in some form or fashion. Do an activation instead. Some of these things can be done very affordable within a smaller budget that otherwise you're going to look worse if you try to do the booth thing and your budget just can't accommodate that. You can't customize it, you know?
We also talk a lot of times. I tell people like always spending more money on a trade show booth is not always the answer.
No.
Sometimes rethinking your messaging, having an aligned strategy when it comes to like your graphics, theming the booth, getting creative with what the engagement looks like. Like sometimes you can be small and scrappy, right? Like you don't need to have a 20 by 30 because your competitor does. You could have a 10 by 30 and absolutely smash your competitor. I know because we've done it, right?
Yeah.
Like we personally have done it, not with our clients ourselves. Like it goes back to the way that you show up. I think those are such important pieces there. Let's talk a little bit more about, let's shift over a little bit into some of like the new playbook and let's start talking about what we think. Let's give some people some ideas, some different things on what is the playbook. What are the shifts that are happening that are like specific that people can use?
Yeah, I think kind of to me the word's getting played out a little bit at the moment, but it certainly still holds true is the unconference format, right? So having different content the way you set it up, having more peer-to-peer exchange, using the app in a positive way so that people can directly engage with the audience right there. I think one that's really interesting that hasn't gotten enough play is, since we're talking about kind of your event app, if that's what you're using, is putting a filter on that so that people can customize using AI. Like if you look at the way, Spotify has now, you can kind of, you put in a few things and it's going to pull up a playlist for you. You can do the same sort of thing with your content, especially if you're a large organizer and you've got a lot of sessions. Field trips. I mean, I don't know why more events don't do them, meaningful ones. People can only sit for so long. They want to get up, they want to move around, they want to walk around. So have field trips. It's not that hard. If you're in a walkable city, or let's say you're in a new city and you're an association, and so you're still looking for sponsors, get that city to be a sponsor and get them to help, pull in some local artisans or different things that you can do that are relevant. That's a great one. Again, personalizing things. I went to an event recently and they didn't do a swag bag, but they had like a swag, like a create your own. So they just had this area that you walked through.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to grab, of
Like
course,
a help yourself.
yeah, it was this help yourself. It was really interesting. I was like, now this is cool. I appreciate this. Lean into the zero proof movement that's happening right now. Why not do zero proof cocktails that are really interesting? I mean, there's just lots of cool things that I think are happening that help show you are thinking of all of your attendees, their needs, who they are. We've got so many generations happening. The wellness movement, everybody is so conscious of that. Those are like some that I can immediately rattle off.
Yeah, I have a small list here that I've put together, which I can run through. I think one that I really like is kind of like the concept of road shows and kind of the idea of going to where your customer is and delivering them an experience. There's so many cool ways of doing it. When you do that, there's no competition. You're doing it by yourself and you're creating an atmosphere, an environment, an experience for them. And you're getting to have that, again, meaningful and intentional touch point, right? Like the whole purpose of events is we're trying to build relationships, right? Relationships drive sales, they drive partnerships, they drive all the things that we're trying to create. I did right here, I think one that I've seen become more and more, I think is a new playbook, is more stage design, more like visualization style atmospheres when you're going to conferences rather than just kind of dragging on with the same stuff. Stage design, branded environment design. Like people want to go into a space that feels good, it feels elevated.
They also want it to be, IG worthy. I mean, thanks to the whole movement of like, if you don't take a picture, it didn't happen sort of thing.
Yes.
But people want that social element too, right? Like we're just so plugged in that you want to be able to show it off. So I agree. Stage design comes into play with that and having those elevated spaces.
Yeah, I think using technology, I think in my opinion is still too expensive, but overall, I think the cost has come down. It's become easier to utilize and leverage, and I think utilizing technology to help tell stories, to help create a branded environment is very much so more on the new playbook. Another area of new playbook I like is like think tank and peer-to-peer style workshops. I think, how do you get people engaging with one another and talking and communicating? Because I think that's what they come for a lot of times. And partially that's your job when you're running and you're hosting an event. And I think it's the opposite of the old playbook, which the old playbook is just kind of putting things on rinse and repeat.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And on that whole concept of the peer-to-peer, it can happen beforehand as you're planning. Like, yes, maybe you decide 80% of our content's baked. Here's our call for speakers. speakers, you do it the traditional way, but you can reserve so much of your content that you're like, let's do a people's choice. Let's
Yeah.
take it out to our alums or who, to your audience, to those that have registered. It could be a perk for being one of the early bird registrants is you get to vote on which of these sessions you want to see here, be part of, kind of thing.
Yeah. Another one I have here in terms of new playbook is what I would consider like intentional networking. I think networking is in the past been just like kind of roll the balls out there and let people go. And I think there's just way more specific and creative ways of doing it. I do think that think tanks and workshops is kind of like a kill two birds with one stone type deal, right? You're giving them peer to peer, you're giving them problem solve, all these cool things, but then that is networking. Because, Bibi, if you and I are in a workshop together and we hit on a topic in conversation, I'm probably going to find you afterwards and be like, wow, love what you said, blah, blah, blah. Who are you? Where you felt like you just, so I think more intentional networking is a big one for me. I think you mentioned earlier, kind of like bad happy hours, and there's nothing wrong. Like I love a good happy hour. I love having a drink, but I don't think if that's the only thing that you're throwing out there, I don't think it's enough to call your event a networking event. So there needs to be a little more intentional. And again, I think when you're being intentional, you're driving value to the people that are there. What are the things that they really want out of this event? And you have to deliver it.
Yeah, it's so true. Intentionality is everything. I think that's what we're both kind of driving home, that it really makes the difference. To me, intentionality makes the difference between like having a moment versus having a movement. And you want your event to have a movement.
Yeah, for sure. Bibi, what else you got? You have any more on your list that we can kind of break down?
Okay, so I do have a personal pet peeve that I really can't stand. And I attend a few kind of women leadership focused events. The glam squad thing. Can we please stop with the glam squads?
Explain more of that to me.
Why is there always a glam squad at some of these events? Most people have a headshot at a certain point. I love it. Someone's like, agreed. I'm just like, enough of this. I would rather see something kind of interesting, that why do they assume that women don't want to take a little mini lesson? Like have, who are those people? Top Golf show up and let's work on a swing. Can it be something else that's just a tad more interesting other than we're going to have someone that can do your hair and makeup and give you a headshot?
Never thought of that.
I'm just enough. So that is definitely probably one of my more personal peeves. What I consider is like have a more grounding space. Give us activations of grounding.
I think sometimes too, like a lot of what I'm hearing is to think differently, right? It's like I think sometimes people fall in a routine of just doing the same stuff. And it's like, okay, how do you break somebody's pattern? Like, how do you pattern interrupt at an event? People are there, they're physically engaged, and that should be part of what you're trying to do. And kind of what you're mentioning is a bit of a pattern interrupt,
Yeah.
And I think that you have a lot of women that maybe get put into a box of what they may or may not like versus sometimes getting creative and maybe digging less into, is it a male or is it a female, but maybe like what industry, what are the interests, what are those, and trying to deliver things that are different to people.
Yeah. I also always wonder, why are certain events so afraid to get that instant feedback? I mean, you have all of your attendees there, all your sponsors there, your exhibitors there, like whatever it is, why wouldn't you want real-time feedback and make it cool and interesting? Have a phone booth. Have it to where like someone could pick it up and, on the other end is like, thanks for calling. Almost, you guys remember how W Hotel used to be so obnoxious? You'd pick up the phone and be like, whatever, whenever. And then you would ask whatever it was that you needed of them. I mean, you could kind of be snarky if you wanted to, if that worked with your brand, with your vibe. If not, giving people the opportunity to say something, to give you positive feedback in real time. That is like a golden nugget. And why some event organizers haven't latched onto that, I just think is so bizarre.
Yeah, that's a good point there.
Disruptor. So yeah.
A few I have here I think are obvious. I think sustainability and making your best effort and everybody kind of doing their part, right? Like everybody doing their part. For example, we just had our post event, right? And we didn't give any swag away. And we didn't really give any swag away because we hosted corporate event marketers. And why would we give corporate event marketers swag when they've seen all of it and a lot of it turns into junk? So what we did was we made a donation to a certain project. We explained the project to them. We showed it to them. It was a really cool industry. So different shifts like that, I think, to do your part in being sustainable. Another one I put here was building in more white space for people, right? Having this like crazy regimented next to next to next, it becomes like exhausting versus giving people a little bit of time to decompress, giving people a little bit of time from session to session to have conversations. I think that's another one that I'd like to see more of.
I agree. The sustainability is sadly, it's such an interesting one because it's what people talk about, but they just don't do, right?
Yeah.
From lanyards, that we still have lanyards, I find so bizarre. And I get it. When you have a large event, you probably do, but maybe make it out of interesting material, like replant, like the seeds, right? Where people can plant them. And at the end of your event, like if you're a week-long event, then on Friday, have a planting party where people, if they want to show up and plant, they can and have a.
I like that.
The other part is if you're a smaller event, why not make them wristbands? We're already creating festival-like vibes anyway, to your point, Matt, that you mentioned earlier. So why not have them as a wristband?
Yeah, wow, like
Be a
that.
certain kind of material. Like I understand a lot of, having been on the agency side for sure, we've had clients that are like, oh, we want everything sustainable. Those materials are more expensive. So guess what? That usually gets cut. So start thinking then in other ways. Where is it more palatable? Or how committed is your brand really to being sustainable?
Yep.
We've talked about field trips, interesting content, way to disrupt. Maybe one of those things are to go into that community in which that event is held and help clean up a park or clean up a school or get involved with the local boys and girls. Like there's so many different ways to truly fold that in, to really be about it, to put your money where your mouth is, to not just say we are, but to lean in fully. I love saying the real refill stations. What I don't love seeing though is 1,000,000,000,000 water bottles. Most people come with their own water bottle. So why have it? If you're going to use Fill It Forward, which a lot of brands do now, every time you fill your water bottle and you scan the code, money goes to a nonprofit. That's awesome. But then let your attendees know in advance so that they pre-scan that. So when they bring their own water bottle, they can start to participate. I think it's the thoughtfulness. And I think that's essentially you and I have been talking about, the intention, the thoughtfulness. How are you telling the story? How is it connecting to your brand, whether you're an exhibitor, an association, an event organizer? Just think of it completely, the totality of it.
Yeah. Thoughtfulness, intentionality. I think all those things lead me back to one of the principal things that we talk a lot about on this show is knowing your audience. And I don't mean like some bullshit persona of like, it's a male and it's 40 to 60. I don't mean that. Do you know the problems they're trying to solve? Do you know what they deal with day to day? Do you know what they perceive to be valuable? And right, like when they're in a group setting and at an event, like how well do you really know them, right? Yeah. What business initiatives are top of mind for them? Because at the end of the day, the experience and the fun and the ball being together is all great. Honestly, it's taken care of itself for the last 100 years. Like that's why events are still popular. But if you can get more intentional and you can deliver these little tidbits to them when you're saying, oh, like old playbook to me is being like swag. We have to have swag. What are we going to do for swag? Oh, let's look on 4imprint and find which one we think is new and best. No, how about you start with who are you giving it to? Right? Who are you giving it to? And then start having a conversation of what would they appreciate? What would be worthwhile? What are they going to use? What's intentional? And I just think it's a different mindset.
It's so true, but then take it a step further and assume that you're going to have some left over. Is this valuable to a school then? Could this go to your citizen?
Yeah, I love that.
How can we take this to a hospital? Think it all the way through.
Yeah, love that. If anybody has any questions, use the Q&A in the bottom. Bibi and I will take any and all questions as we come down to the last 10, 15 minutes here. So Q&A, bottom of the screen. Fire away if needed. We got one. Never mind. Nope. This is it says, sorry, it is anonymous. You promoted this session as what's really working in events, but you were talking about your dislikes and what you would like to see. I'm not hearing anything about what is working. Do you have examples of an actual event that was really effective and why it was effective? So anonymous attendee, I would disagree with you. We are talking about what's working and what's shifting. So if you want real life examples, we can give real life examples, but some of what isn't working is what's shifting into what is working, right? So that's predominantly been what we've talking about. For example, we talked about not doing keynotes. So that's not working. What is working is peer-to-peer discussions, right? So an example of peer-to-peer discussions would be orchestrating a think tank around a specific topic. An example of what's not working would be really bad panels, right? Panels that we've described as not having the right people up there, not having depth of topic, and then saying, okay, if you're going to do a panel, get the right people, have depth of topic. Now, those topics I can't give you because so I don't know what you're working with, right? But if you want to talk about specific examples of what we have seen working, we'll give you some examples. So maybe let's do some specific examples of what we've seen working. I'll start with a few.
Sure.
My first that I've seen is working is, I would say, stage design, actual event environment stage design, right? That means getting creative with your branded environment. I think Money 2020 is a really good example. If you've ever seen the things that they share and what they post, I think some of the environment and atmosphere they're creating is, again, as I talked about earlier, breaking the pattern. When people walk into events, it's a lot of the same. It's just a lot of the same. It's just a different hotel with different chairs and different tables. But when you create branded environments and you utilize graphics and architecture and structure and greenery and earthy tones, which are popular right now, I think you break that pattern. So that's a specific example that we've seen is stage design and kind of going above and beyond, right? Another one I would give is creative sponsorships, which we talked about earlier, which is you can go to your association or you can go to the people that are hosting the event and saying, hey, I see the sponsorship packet that you've put together, and most of them have probably been around for 10, 15 years. They've been offering it for 10, 15 years, right? But hey, I would really prefer if we could build out an activation and run a podcast and interview people. Like we've seen people do that. We've done it ourselves. So I think it's just shifting into how can you more meaningfully engage with people. Bibi, I don't know if you have any specific examples that you've seen of more like new playbook.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely gave one earlier, right, of the swag, having where people get to just make your own. You get to pick. It's relevant items. It's not going to be like little squishy balls or pens and pencils, but it was like they had like the little immunization or the immune jellies, those little gummies, notepads. It was stuff that was interesting to have. The wellness room. So we talked about that as part of new playbook, how people are bringing in thinking of not having jam-packed schedules, but actually creating space for people to take a moment. So whether that's a white room, there's now puppies that you can pet on the show floor. There's all of these things. We talked about one of the new playbooks is not having lanyards, how much they're hated. I saw a comment in there, they always flip around. Exactly. If you're a smaller size and you can afford to do wristbands instead, do that. How people are using their event app for those peer-to-peer engagements, pulling those into the live audience questions onto stage in real time. I feel like there were a lot of great examples that we gave, pulling in field trips, activations. And I saw someone commented in the chat also, they have a no booth zone. What other things can you do instead of having a booth? These are all part of new playbook. Some things we haven't talked about though, are how we're measuring it, the new math that goes with the new playbook.
Yeah. I think a big one for me that I talked about earlier was pitches disguised as sessions. So that to me is old playbook, right? So new playbook to me would be vet out your sessions. And if you're going to create workshops and sessions, again, drive the value that your audience wants. Because if you have audience and you've worked all this time to get people to this event and you want to run a new playbook event, so you've gotten all these people here, 50, 100, 200, 1,000, however many big your event is, and they come and they're excited and then they walk into your session and then it's a pitch from one of your main sponsors and it doesn't follow along, you're going to lose those people. So now you're just working backwards in reverse. So if you're going to do workshops, you're going to do sessions, do ones that are relevant, do ones that bring value, get people up there on stage that want to teach, get people up there on stage that have a message, that have something to offer and deliver to people. I think that's a real big one. The concept of road shows, I think, is new playbook. Going to where your customer is, throwing dinners in different cities, running offsite activations at conferences in cities and getting smaller groups of people together is a big new playbook version for me, rather than everything just solely happening
we talked about
one
that.
space.
Yeah, those kind of field trip like experiences.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
for sure.
We got another question from Mark Steele. Mark said, do you think these are across the board adjustments on all events, or do you think it's always case by case? And I hate lanyards because they always flip to the backside. Yes, Mark, I hate lanyards too. I hate walking around a show floor, being somewhere and seeing people like look at, I can't stand them. And yeah, good question. No, they're not. I think the mentality is across the board. It is trying to think differently, right? But yeah, case by case, without a doubt, it depends on the event. It depends on the size. It depends on the audience. I think a lot of what we're trying to give people here is just a way of thinking, right? It's a way of looking at stuff the way you've always done them and that they may or may not work anymore. right? So keynotes worked for a really long time. So then I think it comes down to the idea of like, we got keynote heavy. So now you just have to start, it's common sense, asking yourself like, man, does that really work having all of those keynotes? And I think those are just little tidbits, but it does depend. Here, I have another one from Francisco here. Sorry, question. It says, I am a big fan of thinking outside of the box when it comes to sponsorships. And for the most part, people are open to it, but still want you to buy the gold, silver, bronze package with all the useless marketing BS inclusions. This creates a problem for me as a sponsor because to get to that level I want, the spend doubles because the experience, production costs plus sponsorship package piles on. It says have you successfully navigated convos with organizers from their offerings to allow these options? This gets specifically hard with larger format events. Good question, Francisco. I will tell you, yes. Unfortunately, money talks, bullshit walks, right? So at the larger the event, the bigger the players, the harder that it's going to be. I find that the smaller events are more open to it. But I think we're in a time where there are some events that are struggling. There are events that are struggling to gain traction. So to me, I think you have to have some idea of, okay, this is my audience and this is how I would like to engage them from a sponsorship, right? I've seen some people do like coffee shops. I've seen some people do activations with games. I've seen some people rent out hotel rooms and call it like some kind of hub where people come in and get other people to help sponsor. I've seen people that we've gone to people at associations that said that we want to run this podcast, right? So I think you have to shoot your shot was what my advice would be. I think sometimes it's going to be a hard no. They don't need it. And I think sometimes there's other shows that are going to absolutely allow it and we'll get creative with you.
I also think you can do a show within a show, right? So be an event within an event. Some things are hard to participate. Like if you're looking at a CES, right? That is expensive.
Yeah.
But could you do something on the side? Could you be adjacent to that event? Or your date overlaps, but you do it off-site? That might be a more affordable way to go. I know being at GDC, at Black Hat, we saw it all the time. And we, as the show organizers, we just allowed that. We weren't going to crack down on it because we knew not everyone could afford to be on Expo 4, afford a large, high impact partnership or sponsorship package in that way. But it didn't, as long as they were bringing value, bringing meaning, the attendees were enjoying it. Frequently you will have your event organizers that will just sort of look the other way. They cannot stop all of those things. They're not even going to bother trying to interfere. There's so much going on. So if you're able to create an event within that event that's adjacent to it, that could be more economical.
No, I like that a lot. Answer your question. I mean, I think honestly, everybody deals differently with different associations and different events and hosts and partnership events. I think it depends on that case, but I think the action of going there, offering something different and unique, and also conveying why it's valuable to the audience, because the show or the association is just as interested in the audience receiving value as you are. So I think it kind of has to be a pitch in that sense. All right, Bibi, let's wrap this up. I have like two overarching, as we were talking, one idea that I had here is that it's less of one size fits all and more of a curated approach. I think we kind of touched on that from an overarching standpoint. The second is, I think a lot of event people need to get out of being event people and they need to get into being marketers and thinking like a marketer. When you're at an event, you become a marketer. You're not just an event planner anymore. You're a marketer. Your company is marketing themselves. So how the event is run, how you show up, the way you touch point with clients, the exchanges you have, it becomes marketing, not a thing.
It does. It's marketing. It's also experience. It's really about, that's what you're creating. That's what you're curating. That's what you're delivering are these experiences for people, whether that experience is education, that experience is a learning opportunity, that experience is engagement with one another, peer-to-peer connection, connecting a product with a vendor. Like it could be all of those things.
Yep.
That's what's really happening. And so I agree it's marketer, but I think people should think of themselves as connectors, because that's what we're essentially doing in these event formats. We're in IRL, there's nothing like it. And after coming out of being online still, hybrid work environments and everything else, people are just hungry for being in person. And that's the beauty of it. That's where really the magic lies within these events. And if you're an organizer, I challenge people to think of themselves as really being like a chief dream officer, right? You're making dreams come true. You're bringing people brands that they wouldn't. You're bringing people to an experience that they wouldn't. They're seeing something things that they wouldn't normally. Maybe they get to, in real life, like touch with VR, they get to engage with something, they get immersed. But yes, definitely putting on that marketing hat.
Awesome. That cuts us right. I always like to keep it as close to an hour as I can. Thanks for everybody for coming today. We had about 50 people in here for a good bit of this session, which was great. Bibi, thanks for talking with me. Thanks for coming in here and kind of spreading some of your knowledge. Great show. Thanks for doing it. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
It was a pleasure to be here. I thought it was a great conversation. So hopefully
awesome
as well.
And everybody, I don't know the next, we'll probably push out some of the next shows. Ish may have already put it in the chat, or Cody at this point in time. But yeah, that's a wrap. It's another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for giving us an hour. Bibi, thank you again. I enjoyed it.
Same here.
See you, everybody. Thank you so much.